I am Helena Catherine Moore, and I am 58 years old. On the morning my life was pulled apart by legal papers and quiet cruelty, I sat alone at the long mahogany table in my kitchen, staring at an envelope that felt heavier than it looked. Morning light filtered through the wide windows, landing softly on surfaces I had cleaned with my own hands for years: polished counters, neatly arranged chairs, a home that once echoed with laughter and now held only silence. A cup of chamomile tea sat beside me, untouched, its steam long gone. I had been sitting there for hours, unable to bring myself to open the envelope again, though I already knew every word inside by heart. Before you continue this story, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. These stories reach people who are silently enduring pain, injustice, and betrayal, and your support helps voices like mine finally be heard. The envelope had arrived 3 days earlier, delivered by a courier who wouldn't meet my eyes. At first, I thought it was another bank document, maybe a follow-up from the estate. But the moment I saw the letterhead, Ravenhill District Court, my hands had gone cold. Inside were pages filled with accusations so sharp they felt personal, deliberate, and cruel. My stepson, Lucas Moore, was suing me. He claimed I had manipulated his father, Edwin Moore, into leaving me his entire estate. According to him, I was an uneducated homemaker, a woman with no business inheriting anything beyond kitchen utensils and grocery receipts. Those words echoed in my mind now, bouncing off the walls of a house that no longer felt like shelter. Edwin had been gone for 6 months. 6 long months since cancer hollowed him out and finally took him from me. 6 months since the house stopped feeling alive. Every creak of the floorboards reminded me that I was alone. Or so I had thought. Now, the law itself had decided to sit across from me, point its finger, and ask me to justify my existence. I folded the papers neatly and slid them back into the envelope. I had cried already. Quietly. Privately. I would not do it again. Lucas had never liked me. From the moment his father introduced us, I could feel it. He tolerated me the way one tolerates an inconvenience. Polite smiles, stiff conversations, a constant distance. To him, I was temporary. A woman who cooked meals, managed doctor appointments, and kept the house running smoothly while the real decisions happened elsewhere. What he never accepted was that his father had chosen me. Not because he was weak, but because he trusted me completely. The estate Lucas was fighting over was valued at $6.4 million. It included the house, Edwin's investment portfolio, and his shares in a private development firm he had built over 30 years. Lucas believed it should all be his by default. After all, he was blood. I was just the woman who showed up later. The courthouse in Ravenhill City was already buzzing when I arrived that morning. The building stood tall and cold, all glass and stone, designed to intimidate rather than welcome. Inside, the air felt heavy, thick with whispered conversations, expensive perfume, and the subtle confidence of people who believed they belonged there. Lawyers moved through the corridors with purpose, suits pressed sharp, voices low but assured. This was their battlefield. I walked alone. My heels echoed softly against the marble floors as I entered the courtroom. Lucas sat across the room in a tailored charcoal suit, relaxed, almost amused. Beside him sat a man I recognized immediately, Victor Hale, one of the most aggressive estate litigation attorneys in the state. He was known for dismantling opponents with precision and humiliation. I had seen him on television, heard his name spoken with both admiration and fear. "She won't last 10 minutes, Lucas said loudly, not bothering to lower his voice. I felt it, that familiar tightening in my chest. But I said nothing. Silence had always been my shield. When the bailiff called the court to order and Judge Nathaniel Cross entered, Victor rose smoothly, ready to address the bench. But the moment his eyes met mine, his composure fractured. His face drained of color, and for a brief second, the confidence slid right off him. The leather briefcase in his hand slipped, crashing to the floor with a loud thud that echoed through the room. It's you," he whispered, barely audible. "This can't be real." The courtroom went still. "Mr. Hale?" Judge Cross asked calmly. "Is there an issue?" Victor swallowed hard. "Your Honor, I knew Mrs. Moore many years ago." Lucas leaned toward him, whispering sharply. "What are you talking about?" I adjusted my glasses and waited. Inside me, something stirred, something old, something I had buried beneath years of compromise and quiet sacrifice. A strength I had not needed in a long time. The judge nodded, signaling for the proceedings to begin. Victor launched into his opening statement with forced confidence. Your Honor, this case concerns undue influence. An uneducated homemaker manipulated her late husband into leaving her the entirety of his estate. Each word landed like a calculated blow. My client, Lucas Moore, was denied his rightful inheritance by a woman who offered nothing but deception. Lucas leaned back in his chair, smirking. I lowered my gaze to my folded hands and whispered, barely audible, "You have no idea who I am." When the judge asked if I had legal representation, I stood slowly. "No, Your Honor. I will be representing myself." A ripple of murmurs swept through the courtroom. "She can't even handle her own finances," Lucas laughed. "This will be entertaining." Judge Cross frowned but nodded. "Very well, Mrs. Moore. You may proceed." I took a slow breath, feeling my pulse steady. 20 years earlier, I had traded authority for peace. I had stepped away from a courtroom and into a home, believing love required sacrifice. But standing there now, facing the man who despised me and the lawyer who once feared me, I remembered exactly who I used to be. The first witness Victor called was Mrs. Alvarez, my neighbor. She was a gentle woman with nervous hands and eyes that wouldn't meet mine as she took the stand. "Mrs. Alvarez," Victor said smoothly, "you spoke with Mrs. Moore shortly before her husband's death, correct?" "Yes," she whispered. "She was crying on her porch one evening." "Did she mention the will?" Mrs. Alvarez hesitated, then nodded. "She said she hoped he would take care of her." Victor smiled faintly. "No further questions." I stood calmly. "Mrs. Alvarez," I said gently, "do you remember why I was crying that night?" She blinked. "Because Edwin's doctor said the treatments weren't working." "And did I say I was afraid of losing money?" "No," she whispered. "You said you were afraid of losing him." "Thank you." The room shifted. That pattern repeated itself. Witness after witness unraveled Victor's carefully constructed narrative. The banker admitted all transfers were transparent. The doctor confirmed Edwin was mentally sound. Still, Victor pushed on. "This woman lacks the education to manage an estate of this size," he argued. "She couldn't possibly handle assets exceeding $6 million. Lucas laughed loudly. Judge Cross turned to me. "Mrs. Moore, do you wish to respond?" I stood. "Yes, Your Honor. I may not have been in a courtroom for years, but I know a weak case when I hear one." Victor scoffed. "And what exactly qualifies you to say that?" "Experience." The judge leaned forward. "Clarify." "My full legal name is Helena Catherine Moore," I said clearly. "Formerly Judge Helena Catherine Reed of the Eastborough Superior Court." The silence that followed was absolute. Victor froze. "Judge Reed," he whispered. "That's impossible." Lucas shot to his feet. "She's lying." "No," I said calmly. "Your father married a woman who chose love over power." Judge Cross stared at me, stunned. In that moment, the balance of the courtroom shifted, and everyone felt it. I remained standing after the revelation, my hands resting lightly on the edge of the table before me. The courtroom had not moved. Not a cough, not a shuffle of papers. Even the ceiling fans seemed to slow, as though the room itself was holding its breath. I could feel eyes on me from every direction, curious, stunned, reassessing. A moment earlier, I had been a grieving widow fighting alone. Now, I was something else entirely. A memory many of them hadn't expected to see walk back into their world. Judge Nathaniel Cross leaned back slightly in his chair, studying me with new eyes. "Mrs. Moore," he said carefully, "you're confirming that you are, in fact, Judge Helena Catherine Reed, formerly of the Eastborough Superior Court?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied evenly. "I served for 11 years before stepping down." Victor Hale looked like a man who had just discovered the ground beneath him was hollow. He swallowed hard, straightened his tie, and attempted to recover his composure. I had seen that look before, on lawyers who suddenly realized the terrain had shifted beneath their feet. Lucas, on the other hand, looked furious. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, half rising from his seat. "If she was some big judge, why didn't anyone know? Why didn't my father tell us?" I turned to him slowly. "Because your father valued peace more than pride. And I respected that." Judge Cross raised a hand. "Mr. Moore, sit down. You'll have your opportunity to testify." Lucas dropped back into his chair, his jaw tight, his knuckles white. Victor cleared his throat. "Your Honor, had we been aware of Mrs. Moore's former position, we would have approached this case differently." The judge's expression hardened. "That may be precisely the problem, Mr. Hale." A faint ripple of murmurs passed through the gallery. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. That was never my way. Authority didn't require arrogance, only clarity. The proceedings resumed, but the tone had changed. Every question Victor asked now sounded cautious, measured. Gone was the swagger, replaced by calculation. He knew he was no longer dealing with someone who could be cornered easily. He called the estate banker to the stand again, attempting to regain ground. "Mr. Levin," Victor said, "you testified earlier that Mr. Edwin Moore transferred certain assets to Mrs. Moore prior to his death." "Yes," the banker replied. "Isn't it true that these transfers occurred during a period of severe illness?" "Yes," Mr. Levin said carefully, "but under direct instruction from Mr. Moore himself." "And Mrs. Moore was present for these discussions?" "I was," I said calmly before the banker could answer. Victor turned sharply toward me. "Mrs. Moore, you're not the witness." "No," I replied evenly. "But I am permitted to clarify facts when mischaracterized." Judge Cross nodded. "Proceed." Victor exhaled slowly. "Mr. Levin, was Mrs. Moore involved in the decision-making?" "She was informed," the banker said. "But the instructions were entirely Mr. Moore's. He was very clear." Victor nodded stiffly and dismissed the witness. As the morning wore on, his case continued to unravel. Each witness added context that stripped away the narrative of manipulation. Edwin had been deliberate, thoughtful, and consistent. He had prepared thoroughly. He had anticipated this challenge. By the time the judge called for a brief recess, Victor looked like he had aged several years. Lucas leaned toward him urgently. "Fix this," Lucas hissed. "You said this would be easy." Victor said nothing. In the hallway outside the courtroom, reporters buzzed like flies, sensing blood in the water. Cameras flashed the moment I stepped out, but I ignored them. I wasn't there for spectacle. I was there for truth. When court resumed, Victor stood again, visibly shaken but determined. "Your Honor," he began, "we would like to call the plaintiff, Mr. Lucas Moore, to the stand." Lucas straightened his jacket, attempting to recover his earlier confidence, and walked toward the witness box. He took the oath, casting me a look that tried and failed to intimidate. Victor approached him gently. "Lucas, tell the court about your relationship with your father in the years leading up to his passing." Lucas sighed heavily. "We were close. Until she came along." I tilted my head slightly, listening. "She controlled everything," Lucas continued. "His schedule, his money, even who he spoke to." "And how did that make you feel?" Victor asked softly. "Pushed out," Lucas said quickly. "Like I didn't matter anymore." Victor nodded, turning toward the jury. "In your opinion, did Mrs. Moore manipulate your father?" "Yes," Lucas said firmly. "She's calm, calculated, always acting innocent." Victor stepped back. No further questions. I rose slowly, unhurried. The room shifted again. "Lucas," I said softly, "when was the last time you visited your father before he was hospitalized?" He frowned. "I don't remember exactly." I picked up a folder. According to his personal calendar, it was 14 months before his diagnosis. "Does that sound correct?" Lucas shifted in his seat. "I called him." "How often?" "Regularly." I handed the phone records to the judge. "In the 6 months before your father passed, you called him 3 times. Each call lasted less than 10 minutes. Murmurs rippled through the room. Victor started to speak, but Judge Cross held up a hand. "Lucas," I continued gently, "you said I kept you from him. Can you name a single time I told you not to visit?" He stared at the table. "Did I ever turn you away when you came?" "No," he muttered. "You claimed I interfered with your private conversations," I said calmly. "Do you remember why I stayed nearby?" "Because you wanted control," he snapped. "No," I replied firmly. "Because your father had severe hearing loss. I helped him understand what you were saying." Lucas blinked, visibly stunned. I stepped closer. "Do you remember his 70th birthday?" He hesitated. "You missed it," I said quietly. "I reminded you the morning of." A tear slipped down my cheek, but my voice remained steady. "I wasn't protecting myself, Lucas. I was protecting your father from loneliness." The courtroom was utterly silent. "You always made him love you more than me," Lucas whispered bitterly. "No," I said softly. "Love doesn't replace. It expands. But you never stayed long enough to see it." I took a breath. "Do you remember the final week of his life?" Lucas swallowed. "I called you 6 times, I continued, begging you to visit." "I was busy," he snapped. "You were in Silver Bay gambling," I said quietly. Gasps filled the room. "Your father was dying," I continued, "and you were spending the money he gave you for rent." Lucas's shoulders sagged. "I'm not here to destroy you," I said gently. I'm here to remind this court what duty looks like. His voice broke. I just wanted him to love me. He did, I said. You just never believed you were enough. When I stepped back, the jury looked at me differently. Not as an opponent, but as a truth teller. The judge called for another recess. Victor looked hollowed out. Lucas stared at the floor, his confidence gone. As I gathered my notes, Victor muttered to Lucas, "We're in trouble." "You should have listened," I said calmly, passing them. Truth always speaks eventually. Judge Cross watched me closely. "Mrs. Moore," he said quietly, "you're conducting yourself with remarkable skill." I nodded. "Some things don't fade, Your Honor." Outside the courtroom, the city buzzed. Headlines were already forming. But inside me, something else was happening. I wasn't fighting for money anymore. I was reclaiming myself. I slept very little that night. Not because I was afraid, but because my mind refused to be quiet. Memories rose uninvited. Long corridors lined with law books, the weight of a robe on my shoulders, the echo of a gavel striking wood. I had buried that life for years, folding it neatly behind marriage, caregiving, compromise. I told myself I was content. I told myself love was enough. But as dawn crept through the curtains of my bedroom, I realized something profound. I had not lost myself back then. I had only set myself aside. That morning, I dressed with intention. Not with defiance or drama, but with clarity. I chose a deep navy suit I hadn't worn in years, pressed and timeless. I pinned my hair back, the way I used to before taking the bench. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a widow or a defendant. I saw a woman fully awake. Outside, Ravenhill City was already buzzing. News vans lined the courthouse steps. Reporters whispered my name like a secret rediscovered. As I walked past them, cameras flashed, microphones lifted. But I didn't slow down. I had spent too many years being explained by others. Today, the truth would speak for itself. Inside the courtroom, the air felt different. Heavier. Expectant. Lucas sat rigidly at the plaintiff's table, his confidence replaced by a brittle stillness. His suit looked looser on him now, as though arrogance had once filled it out and then drained away. Victor Hale sat beside him, flipping through papers he already knew would not save him. The man who once entered courtrooms like a conqueror now looked like a soldier trapped behind enemy lines. Judge Nathaniel Cross entered, his expression solemn but alert. "Court is in session," the bailiff announced. Judge Cross nodded once, then looked directly at me. "Mrs. Moore, you indicated yesterday that you would be presenting additional evidence today." "Yes, Your Honor," I said calmly. "With the court's permission." "Proceed." Victor rose immediately. "Your Honor, the witness list was closed." "This is not a new witness," I said evenly. "It is my husband." The room erupted in murmurs. Victor turned sharply toward me. "That's impossible. I submitted the recording into evidence last week," I continued. "It was disclosed and approved." Judge Cross glanced at the file, then nodded. "The court will allow it." Lucas shot to his feet. "This is a trick. He's dead." "Yes," I said softly. But not silent. The bailiff wheeled in a monitor. As the screen flickered to life, the courtroom stilled. Edwin appeared seated in his study, thinner than the man I married but unmistakably himself. His eyes were clear. Calm. Prepared. "If you are watching this," he began, "it means my son has done exactly what I feared he would." Lucas shook his head violently. "This isn't fair." Judge Cross silenced him with a glance. "I was not manipulated," Edwin continued. "Every decision I made regarding my estate was deliberate. My wife, Helena, stood by me through 2 surgeries, months of chemotherapy, and the slow erosion of my strength. She gave up her own career, one I later discovered was extraordinary, without resentment or complaint." The courtroom was frozen. "My wife is Judge Helena Catherine Reed," Edwin said firmly. "And though she never told me at first, I came to understand the weight of what she set aside to build a life with me." Victor's face was ashen. "I know my son's anger," Edwin continued. "I know he believes love can be stolen. But Helena never stole anything. She earned my trust, my respect, and my devotion. Every bit of it." Lucas collapsed back into his seat, his face drained of color. "When you hear accusations today," Edwin said, "remember this. I left my estate where it would be protected, not from greed but from waste." The video ended. Silence followed. Not the uncomfortable kind, but the reverent kind that follows truth when it finally stands uncovered. Judge Cross cleared his throat. "Mr. Hale, do you wish to cross-examine the testimony?" Victor stood halfway, then sank back into his chair. No, Your Honor. I rose once more. I have additional documentation, I said, placing a thick folder before the judge. Financial records showing that Lucas Moore borrowed $152,000 from his father over 12 years. None of it was repaid. There are also handwritten notes from my husband expressing concern, not about me, but about his son's entitlement. Judge Cross reviewed the papers slowly. These are substantial, he said. Lucas whispered hoarsely. You didn't have to do this. I turned to him gently. I didn't do this, Lucas. You did. His shoulders began to shake. I just wanted him to love me. He did, I said softly. But love doesn't excuse neglect. And it doesn't erase responsibility. I turned to the jury. This case was never about money, I said clearly. It was about dignity. About a woman being labeled unworthy because she chose devotion over display. We are judged not by what we accumulate, but by what we protect. The jury returned swiftly. The verdict was unanimous. Judge Cross's voice was firm and final. The court finds in favor of Helena Catherine Moore on all counts. The will stands in full. The plaintiff's claims are dismissed with prejudice. The gavel struck. Applause broke out before the bailiff could stop it. I closed my eyes briefly, not in relief, but in gratitude. Not for victory, but for restoration. 6 months later, sunlight poured through the windows of my new office overlooking Ravenhill City. A brass plaque gleamed on the door. Helena Catherine Moore, attorney at law. Women came from everywhere, widows, caregivers, women dismissed as just housewives. I took their cases, often without charge. I fought with precision and patience, not anger. Headlines followed. They called me the judge who returned. I called it purpose. One evening, Lucas asked to meet me. We sat at a small cafe downtown, the city humming quietly around us. I'm sorry, he said. For everything. I studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Your father would have wanted peace. As we parted, he said quietly, You're stronger than anyone I know. Not stronger, I replied. Just awake. And as I walked away, I knew this chapter, every wound, every silence, had finally been redeemed. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most.